Have you ever spent hours studying, only to forget almost everything the next day? It's frustrating, isn't it? You highlight, you reread, you even stay up late, and yet, your mind feels like a leaky bucket. Now imagine this. What if I told you that science has discovered a way to remember 4 times longer, without spending more effort, not by working harder, but by learning smarter? In today's video, I'm going to walk you through 4 powerful memory techniques, ranked from the easiest to the most life-changing, all proven by top universities like Princeton and UCLA. And here's the exciting part. If you stay with me until the middle of this video, I'll reveal the one method that world-class learners use to make knowledge stick for life. So let me ask you this. What would it feel like to study less, remember more, and finally trust your own memory? Stay tuned, because we're about to turn that leaky bucket into a steel vault of knowledge. Let me start with the easiest method, the one that can transform your memory with almost no extra effort. It's called spaced repetition. Picture this. A college student named Emma was always cramming the night before her exams. She would read her notes over and over, highlighting every line. But a week later, almost everything was gone. Then, she discovered spaced repetition. Instead of cramming, she used a simple app, **Anki****, that reminded her to review information right before her brain was about to forget it. The first review came the next day, then 3 days later, then a week, then 2 weeks. Each review was quick, and it felt almost effortless. Here's the science. Back in 1885, Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered the forgetting curve. Our memory fades rapidly if we don't revisit information. But when you space out your reviews, you interrupt that curve, and the memory becomes stronger each time. Modern studies back this up. A recent analysis on thermodynamics students found that those using spaced repetition scored 7 to 15% higher than their peers who relied on cramming. Another study published by ExamCalc showed that spaced repetition can increase memory retention by up to 400%. Think about that for a moment. 4 times better memory, without studying longer. The best part, it's perfect for busy people. You don't have to block extra hours. Just let the app remind you. 5 minutes today, 2 minutes tomorrow, 30 seconds next week. Emma applied this for 3 weeks. By the time her finals came around, she barely had to study, because everything was already locked in her memory. Her friends were burning midnight oil. She was sleeping peacefully, knowing her brain had done the work for her. If you've ever felt frustrated that you just don't have a good memory, spaced repetition is like putting your brain on autopilot. It's the easiest way to start studying less and remembering more. And here's my tip. Start small. Pick 5 flashcards today. Maybe vocabulary, formulas, or key concepts. Feed them into Anki or Quizlet, and let the system guide your reviews. In just a few days, you'll feel the difference. And remember, this is just the first step. Spaced repetition is powerful for keeping facts in your memory, but our next method will double or even triple your attention, without a single extra hour of studying. Now that your brain is warmed up with spaced repetition, let's talk about a method that can double or even triple your attention. It's called active recall, or what scientists call the testing effect. Imagine a young man named Jason. He was preparing for his nursing exam. Every night, he sat with his textbook, reading the same chapters over and over. He thought, if I read it enough times, it'll stick. But here's the hard truth. Reading is not remembering. A week later, Jason could barely recall half of what he studied. One evening, his professor gave him a challenge. Close the book, grab a blank sheet, and write down everything you remember without looking. Jason struggled. At first, he could only recall fragments, but something amazing happened. The act of pulling information out of his memory made the connection stronger. This is active recall. Instead of passively reviewing, you force your brain to retrieve the information. It feels harder, but that's exactly why it works. The science backs this up. A Princeton and University of Pennsylvania study showed that students who self-tested remembered 2 to 3 times more than those who just reread notes. A massive 58-page meta-analysis concluded that retrieval practice, another name for active recall, is one of the highest utility learning techniques we know. Even in medical schools, retrieval-based learning is now standard because it builds deep, lasting memory pathways. Jason switched his strategy. He turned his notes into flashcards, covered key formulas with sticky notes, and gave himself short quizzes every night. Within 3 weeks, his recall was lightning fast. During the exam, he didn't just recognize the answers. He knew them by heart, without second-guessing. The effort paid off. He jumped from barely passing to top 10% of his class. Here's the beautiful part. Active recall doesn't take more time than rereading. It just flips the script. Instead of asking your brain to absorb, you ask it to produce. If you want to try this today, pick one chapter or one topic. Read it once, then close the book. Ask yourself, What are the 3 key points? Can I explain this to a friend? Even if you stumble, that struggle is the magic. Because every time your brain works to recall, you are cementing the memory for the long term. And here's the best part. Combine active recall with spaced repetition, and you've just created a memory powerhouse. But we're not done. The next method takes your understanding to a whole new level. It's the same technique used by scientists, top performers, and even legendary teachers. And it turns complicated ideas into crystal clarity. Now, let's step into a method that doesn't just help you remember. It forces you to understand. This is the self-explanation technique, also known as the Feynman technique, named after the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman. Here's a story. Meet Samantha, a college student struggling with organic chemistry. She was doing everything right, reading textbooks, highlighting, even using flashcards. But when her professor asked her to explain why a reaction happened, she froze. One day, she stumbled upon Feynman's advice. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So she tried something new. She opened her notebook to a blank page, wrote the topic at the top, SN1 versus SN2 reactions, and pretended she was teaching a 10-year-old. At first, she realized she couldn't explain anything without copying the textbook. That was her wake-up call. Every time she got stuck, she went back to the source, simplified the concept, and tried again in her own words. This is the magic of self-explanation. Your brain connects new knowledge with existing knowledge, forming strong, long-term memory networks. The science is clear. A LearningScience.net study showed that learners who used self-explanation techniques had significantly higher comprehension scores than those who just reread. Another experiment found that students who taught the material to imaginary students retained up to 50% more after 1 week. Samantha took it further. She grabbed a small whiteboard, drew the reaction arrows, and spoke out loud like she was giving a mini lecture. Every mistake she caught was a gap in her understanding, and every gap she filled cemented her knowledge. By exam week, something incredible happened. She could explain every reaction step in plain English. When classmates panicked, Samantha calmly said, "Let me show you why this works," and walked them through like a teacher. Here's why this method is so powerful. When you restate information in your own words, your brain deeply processes it. When you teach or explain, you automatically organize your thoughts. And when you simplify complex ideas, you create memory anchors that stick for years. If you want to try this today, 1. Pick a topic you're studying. 2. Pretend you're teaching it to a friend with no background in the subject. 3. Whenever you stumble, mark that spot, review it, and try again. Do this a few times, and you'll notice something life-changing. You don't just remember the information. You own it, asterisk, asterisk. And once you own it, you can apply it anywhere. On exams, at work, or in real-world problem-solving. Now, what if I told you there's one final method that feels harder, but turns your memory into steel? It's the desirable difficulties technique, and it's the secret behind long-term mastery. Now we arrive at the final and most powerful method. It might not feel easy at first, but it's the one that builds a memory that lasts for years. It's called desirable difficulties. Here's what that means. You intentionally make learning harder in small, strategic ways. Not frustrating, not impossible. Just enough to make your brain work harder. Let me tell you a quick story. There's a young medical resident named David. He had to memorize hundreds of drug interactions for his exams. At first, he did what everyone else did. Read the notes over and over. But the next day, he had already forgotten half of it. One day, his mentor said, "Stop making it easy for yourself. If it feels effortless, your brain isn't really learning." So David tried a different approach. 1. He tested himself on a blank sheet of paper before reading the notes. 2. He mixed topics together. Instead of studying all antibiotics first, he combined antibiotics, painkillers, and blood thinners. 3. He hid part of the information, forcing himself to recall it from memory. At first, it felt slow and awkward, but over the next few weeks, he realized something extraordinary. The things he struggled with stuck the longest. This is the core of desirable difficulties. Research by Robert Bjork at UCLA proves that, when learning feels slightly uncomfortable, memory can last 2 to 5 times longer than when everything feels smooth and easy. Why does this happen? Because effort tells your brain, "This is important, store it for the long term." When you fight for the answer, you create stronger neural pathways. Think about it like weight training. If you always lift the lightest weight, your muscles never grow. But if you add just enough challenge, you get stronger with every session. Here are 3 ways you can apply this today. Do a blank test first before reviewing your notes. Even if you fail, your brain will remember the correction better. Mix topics instead of studying one thing at a time. This is called interleaving. and it forces your brain to sort and connect knowledge, hide key details, and try to recall them from memory, like covering part of a diagram or removing keywords. Yes, it's harder. Yes, it can be a little uncomfortable, but that's the point. As Robert Bjork says, the more you work for it, the longer you keep it. David passed his exams with one of the highest scores in his class. Months later, while his friends had already forgotten most details, he could still recall them as if he studied yesterday. And that's the gift of desirable difficulties. Short-term struggle for long-term mastery. It focuses on emotional transition and personal storytelling first. The product is only mentioned at the very end as a smooth bridge to part 7. It keeps the motivational, conversational, and American English tone for AI voice. Here's the rewritten version. You know, as we move through these memory-boosting techniques, from spaced repetition to desirable difficulties, there's something deeper I've noticed. It's not just about remembering facts. It's about the state of your mind and heart when you sit down to learn. I once worked with a young man named Ethan. He was bright, hardworking, and he devoured every productivity book he could find. He tried all the strategies. Flashcards, recall tests, color-coded notes. And yes, his grades improved. But here's the thing. He still felt exhausted and unfocused inside. Every time he sat down to study, his mind kept racing through worries. Work deadlines, family stress, the constant ping of notifications. One day, he told me, it feels like I'm carrying too much weight in my head, so no matter how good the technique is, my brain just wants to rest. And that's when it hit me. Sometimes the barrier to learning isn't about technique at all. It's about mental clutter. When your mind is heavy with noise, your memory is like a foggy window. No matter how hard you try, the information just slips away. But when your inner world is calm and clear, learning becomes effortless. Your focus sharpens. Your creativity comes alive. And every new piece of knowledge sticks naturally. I've seen this shift happen in people who find ways to release old stress, forgive themselves and others, clear space in their mind for new growth. And when that happens, suddenly, all the memory techniques we've talked about become twice as powerful. In the next part, I'll share a special method that does exactly this. A gentle practice that clears mental noise, brings peace to your inner world, and makes learning feel lighter than ever. It's something that completely changed Ethan's life, and I think it might surprise you. When Ethan finally realized his struggle wasn't just about study methods, it was about the weight he was carrying inside, he decided to try something new. Instead of forcing more flashcards or late-night sessions, he took 10 quiet minutes each morning to focus on clearing his mind. And here's what happened. His focus sharpened like never before. Stress that once clouded his memory started to melt away. Even his relationships improved, because he carried less anger and self-doubt. One day, he told me, for the first time, I feel like my brain is on my side, not fighting against me. What he had discovered was a simple, yet deeply powerful practice called Ho'oponopono. It's an ancient Hawaiian method of mental and emotional cleansing, updated for modern life by Dr. Joe Vitale and Dr. Haleakala H.E.W. Len. Instead of adding more to your busy mind, it gently removes the emotional blocks that keep your memory and creativity from working at their best. I've seen it transform not just learning, but people's entire approach to life, making them calmer, more resilient, and more open to new opportunities. And the best part? You can learn this method step by step, directly from the experts who have spent their lives teaching it. Through the Ho'oponopono certification program, this online course is designed not just to teach the method, but to give you a clear, guided experience that brings peace of mind and helps your brain retain what truly matters. If you've ever felt like your memory or focus is trapped under a heavy cloud, this is your chance to clear the sky. Check out the Ho'oponopono certification and discover how inner clarity can make learning and living lighter, easier, and more fulfilling than you ever imagined.